This is another response video, so if it's not the sort of thing you're interested in, then please feel free to skip this video. If you have been watching my channel, then you'll know that for the last year or so I've been developing a Z80 based computer system. And as I stated at the beginning, the idea was to design and develop from scratch a fairly comprehensive and capable Z80 based computer, but at a discrete level design, so using TTL gates rather than large-scale integration devices. I posted a lot of videos as part of that process, and ultimately as I said I was going to, released a book that detailed the process, or at least the part up to where the first full version of the board was up and running, and I detailed pretty much everything about the development in the videos, and even more detail in the book. And what I tend to do when I release books is they're for sale in quite a few outlets, and I now and again will go through some of the reviews so I can hopefully learn something and try and improve the next book that I release, or maybe try and cover something that I missed or any errors that were in the material. Now, one review I looked at a few days ago is the one that I intend to respond to here. I don't normally respond to reviews, I just sort of take on board the information, but this particular review seemed to encompass pretty much everything I feel is wrong with society today and the way that people have become rather excessively entitled. And it's fairly sad that society has moved in a direction where people are so entitled and narcissistic that they seem to be under the impression that everything should be tailored specifically to their taste, and if it's not, then whoever's created the material is doing it wrong. So the book is about how to go about designing a practical way to go about designing a computer system. It's not intended as a guide to building a single particular computer, and I made that very clear in all the videos. So what I'm going to do is go through the comment or the review point by point. Like I said, if you're not interested in this sort of thing, then feel free to skip the video, but I just wanted to address the points. It's a fairly long and rambling review, so I think there are about 20 points in it, and I'll go over each one in turn. I'll respond to each in turn, and hopefully it will help to clarify for anyone who's still unclear as to what this project is about, what the project is about. I won't respond to any further comments or reviews that go down the same route, simply because I'm sure that anyone that does understand this is getting extremely bored with me keep repeating it, but also after this video, if someone still doesn't get it, then they never will, so there's no value me repeating it again. Now, I also made it clear that the book is not really aimed, or the project as a whole was not really aimed at absolute beginners. However, it was still intended to be of some interest to beginners who may never want to build one of these, but are just interested in the process or in the way machines were designed back in the day. And that's what I was trying to achieve, is just get the general feel of the development across and the way you can go about developing this if you want. Now, a number of people have contacted me since they bought the book or even just watched the videos, and it's very gratifying that they've started developing their own machine. Not all of them are using Z80s. It's fantastic. I'm not saying it's better than a Z80 or worse, but it's just nice that they are kind of going their own way. That's pretty much exactly what I was hoping for with the book and the video series. It's just to try and encourage people to get stuck into something like this, because it is a fascinating and very rewarding thing to do. Now, I should point out here, I'm not trying to pick on anyone in particular. I'm not going to name the person that left the review. I'm just going to go over everything that was said in the review point by point, whether it's good or bad, or just I feel it was maybe a bit off track with relation to the material I had actually released. So we'll move over to the PC and we'll look. I've kind of typed out responses to each of the points, and I'll go through each of those in turn and hopefully it will make some sense. Okay, so this is how the review started. What he wrote is in black and the response I'm giving is in red. I haven't, as I say, responded directly to the review. I'm just going over it here in the hope that I can try and make it clear to anyone that doesn't really understand the point of the project what I was aiming for. So he starts off by saying that he learned about the JMZ computer on YouTube, but sadly I don't think he really learned anything, and I'll explain why as we go through this. So looking at the next part of the review, this is all one review and I've just broken it into the salient points, and as I say, I'll address each in turn. So he says that I showcased over 40 videos, and this was really aimed at showing how to go about the process. And he says I mentioned multiple times that I didn't want to provide schematics or source code as I wanted to publish a book, and this is a review about that particular book. And this is partly true, although I never mentioned this in the videos. Somebody else actually in one of the comments said he believed that was the case, but I never actually said that. I didn't show full schematics in the videos because they didn't exist. I remember that was the purpose of the series, was to create the schematics and develop them. But having said that, I did show pretty much every single one that was being developed in the videos, and I showed the process. But the thing is, it was a design, and as I said in the videos and also in the book, it was a design process, and the schematics and the source code would be constantly changing. So there's no point me releasing anything at that point because, as it says here, it was either faulty, untested, incomplete schematics or source code, so it would be pointless trying to release it and having somebody else try to follow something that I hadn't finished. But as I say, I did show many of the schematics and source code throughout the videos, so it's kind of an untrue statement really. That's nonsense really. It's not what I said in the videos, and certainly not what I said in the book. So the next point, he's very surprised from the start that my book did not show any online references. But I've got no idea what this relates to. References to what? There were no online references. And as I said repeatedly, the book was the process. So at the beginning of the book, when I'm writing the beginning of the book and all the way through, what is available as we get to each page of the book, and as you read it, that's all that existed of that particular machine. It was not a retrospective on what I did. It was a retrospective, or rather a description of what I was doing. So there was no references, there's nothing to reference. Everything that was referenceable is what was in the videos, and that was entirely the purpose of them. I did explain all this in the videos. The videos are how to go about designing a computer, not how to design a specific machine. I have gone back and checked, and I did state that at least 30 times during the video series. So a bit surprised that he was surprised. Maybe he just didn't watch the videos very clearly. It's also a bad idea to reference any online resources in a printed book anyway, because they will disappear probably not long after the book's been published, and then it makes all the references invalid. I've bought a few books over the years with references and CDs with links and what should be online resources that just aren't available, even though the book's running a few years old. So it's kind of an irrelevant point, and it's not what was being provided in the book anyway. And again, it's one of these products of the immediate gratification generation who think that they are entitled to everything, irrespective of what it costs other people. So on to the next point. As promised, the book contains schematics, though in a very hard to use form, and some software. Well, it contained the full listing for the monitor ROM, so I don't know why he's saying and some software, and it contained the entire schematics for the machine that was shown in the book. only really for reference. It wasn't really intended as the source schematics for somebody else to duplicate it, but they certainly could. The schematics were complete. I was of course limited by the size of the pages, which is why the schematics, I think there were 12 pages of schematics in the book. That's just the schematics at the end. There were detailed enlarged schematics of every single circuit in the machine throughout the book. So quite what he's referring to here, again, I'm a bit mystified by. As I say here, the book contains clear schematics, full listing for monitor ROM, plus the contents of the character ROM, but the person seems unable to grasp the basic concept and is only looking for a final solution. This is really why I started my channel, when I noticed how many people were just looking to buy an Arduino or a display, download some software, plug them all together without understanding them. And I'm not really interested in catering to somebody that wants that. That's not what I was aiming for, and it's unfortunate if that's what he was looking for, but I assumed that the videos would make it very clear what the book was going to be about. So on to the next point. Nothing was provided in electronic form, not even a PDF allowing you to print out the schematics in a usable size. Seen this sort of comment before. I create reproduction electronic components, boards, that sort of thing, and every time I've provided something in electronic format, it's appeared on the internet within hours. So I don't do that. That would be cutting my own throat. And generally speaking, if that's what someone's demanding, then I think they may have an ulterior motive. So I generally don't do that. That's, the information is provided in the book. That's why I'm selling a book. The book's not intended, as I've said, for a guide for building a particular computer. It's aimed at showing how to go about designing a computer, and I think most people got that from the feedback I've had. A lot of people quite enjoyed it and are going about designing their own machines. How far they'll get, I don't know, but hopefully they'll have a lot of fun in the process. I know this was clear, I've said it numerous times, but the fact that a lot of people have gone about designing their own machine would tend to indicate that the point was made. And as I say, the idea was not to give a blueprint for a specific machine, but to give a methodology for designing one. So thanks to everyone that contacted me about their own projects. Very interesting to hear about any projects that are ongoing, and hopefully you have a lot of fun and enjoyment as you work your way through. So on to the next point. He says essentially if you want to duplicate his work, you have to start from scratch. He was so close to understanding the point of the book and the videos here, but despite him looking directly at it, he still failed to see it, which is very sad. It's as I say, he was very close to seeing the entire point and what I was aiming for. He's asked himself his own question: can you at least use the book as a blueprint how to design and build your own Z80 machine? I'd say in parts. Not quite sure he's getting at there. But my response would be yes, you can use it for that if you want to. All the information's there. Even descriptions for every single circuit are in there. All these schematics. Again, detailed explanations as to the thinking behind the design, how they work. All the source code for the monitor ROM, all the code for the character ROM. So basically everything that's in there, everything that's needed is in the book. But also bear in mind, I posted around 40 hours of detailed design videos that show a huge amount of information. But this also seems to contradict his previous point. He's seen better, because simpler designs and explanation on the internet for free. I specifically said at the beginning of the project this was not the easiest way to design a Z80 computer. I also said you could put one together in a few hours if that's what you wanted to do. This is a much more complex design. Intentionally, that was the entire point of the project, and he seems to have, despite me saying this dozens of times, he seems to have completely missed the point. And presumably it's because he's too busy listening to his own ideas rather than stopping and reading or listening to what's being presented to him. But I can't accept this wasn't made clear. It's been made clear enough. He just needs to pay attention. It's also been made even clearer in the book. Now, if he's looking for a simpler design, then why did he purchase a book on a discrete design, especially after I'd gone to all the time and trouble to make the videos that he claims to have watched? I did say the book was really an encapsulation of what was being done in the videos, so I'm not really sure what his gripe is there anyway. Yes, the simple designs are typically free, but then my videos were also free. They're on YouTube, you don't have to pay to watch them. As I say, I put up many hours of videos in lots of detail, showed pretty much all the schematics in the videos, and so again, I'm not sure what his point is here. It just seems to be somewhat erroneous, and possibly it comes down to the sense of entitlement I mentioned I believe he has at the beginning, and he thinks that everything should be provided to him for free. The design for this machine and the book took well over 2,000 hours of hard work over well over a year, and it cost me thousands of pounds in prototype boards and equipment, and he seems to think he should get all that for free. Having said that, I would be interested in obtaining copies of the free printed hardback books he's referring to, because I'm not aware of any. On to the next point. He was really shocked by reading how critical it is to ensure proper timing. That to me is really underlined his absolute lack of knowledge. I've got no idea why he would be shocked. Timing in all digital circuits is critical, and I think this is more down to his general lack of knowledge, resulting in a failure to understand the material in the book and the videos rather than anything that's been omitted from them. But I still don't think that this is a reason for his comments, as I'll expand on over the next few points. He then says I said that I won't explain how I debugged and solved issues on my system. This is just a lie. And before I go any further, let's just have a look at some of the content of the videos I posted. Bear in mind that this is even more detailed in the book. Now, I've had a few people commenting saying that there are easier ways to build Z80 systems these days. Yes, I'm fully aware of that, and that is really the whole point of this series of videos. I'm trying to show what it was like to design and build Z80 systems before we had the current safety nets of large-scale devices. So partly for fun, but also to really fully explain how the inner workings of these devices work. Even the modern chips tend to use very similar techniques to what we're doing here. And they are fairly complicated, but they're also quite easy to understand once you know the basics. They only seem kind of insurmountably complex when you don't know exactly what each part of the system is doing. But once you've built one like this and you fully understand the inner workings, everything starts to become clear, and when you then see an old design, it's much easier to figure out exactly what it's doing, because you can then associate each part of the circuit with the one that you built or one that you worked on before. So the instructions for a Z80 are basically in two chunks, or maybe two chunks, maybe just one, but usually it's something that looks like this. So we have the first part, and then so that's another thing with this design, is that I'm not going to be using SRAM for the main memory. I could do, but that would be far too simple. I'm going to do it the hard way, and we're going to use DRAM. So if you imagine merging all these parts together, it works the same way as an SRAM, that we send it an address, and then if we're reading the data, we then read back and the way we have to time all this is we'll put the data, if we're doing a read for example, we'll put the address onto the address bus, we'll send the lower 8 bits to the memory chip, we'll then strobe the row address line, so the RAS line of the data lines, and we're seeing a value of 7E there. Okay, so I made a note of those. It is consistent, I've tried each one a couple of times and we're getting the same value each time. What I tend to do, once I've got the circuit designed, and I did this with the first design as well, is I want to make sure that all the addressing works. In fact, this was fairly important when I was trying to figure out how to resolve the address issue I was talking about earlier. It's much simpler now, but even so, I still want to make sure I've got this right before I have a board made up. Table or graph like this, plot the data that's coming out for each address, and if that matches what's on the screen, I know that the addressing is correct. So the next thing I'm going to do is design a new PCB with this new layout, and when they come in, I'll get one of these assembled, I'll hook it up to the PIC microcontroller, and we'll send the display some more meaningful data. So I'll get one of these assembled, and then in the next video we can start putting this through its paces and see if our CPU core actually functions. And what we'll do is a very similar test to what we had before. So we'll trigger the analyzer on an address of 9000 EE, and that's towards the end of the block of RAM that we're testing. The block of RAM is from 9000 hex up to 9000 FF, and it has successfully triggered, which is a very good sign. So if we look at the analyzer, we can see that at address 9000 EE, so this is a good start. The board does at least appear to be able to access the DRAM. It means that the decoding is working to a certain extent. We appear to have reset into the correct bank. And so this is the code in question, and I've added a few things here that we're not really using at the moment. And because, as I said, this is now taking on the general structure that our boot ROM will have to take when we start developing it, because we will have to generate a BIOS and some boot ROM, etc.
So far I've put together the basic system. It's a very discrete design, so that's really my main goal for this project, is to avoid the use of any large-scale integration devices. I had originally intended to make this video about the systems aspect of designing something like this. This project is more about how to go about designing a computer rather than how to design this particular machine.
Okay, we've got the circuits set up, we've got the transmitter set, and we're driving it with our 300 nanosecond start pulse. It's got the 10 megahertz main clock going into this circuit. As I said, this is normally part of our main board, and then the 625 kilohertz circuit is being used as the primary clock for the two counters, one for transmit, one for receive. As I said, this is set to 9600 board, but you can see that at a clock or a start frequency of 300 hertz, we're sending 300 characters per second. I'll just temporarily change the character we're sending so you can see that it is responding correctly. We'll go up a bit higher. So we're now running at 38,400, and if I start to increase the character rate, so we're at 1000 characters per second, 2000, 3000, and also to reset the circuit so it's ready to accept the next data value. So I'll press the key on the remote terminal keyboard and we'll send an uppercase A to our receiver, but we'll do that while it's still transmitting it at full speed. We should see the red LED come on. That's the interrupt output line from this circuit. So as you can hopefully see, I showed a huge amount of detail on the process and design of this particular machine, how I went about fault finding it. Yes, you do need to do a lot of testing, but generally speaking, what I'm trying to get across here is if you design it properly, it should work. You might have to do some fault finding, some timing tests, but that's specifically what I was showing in the videos. So again, he's made a completely erroneous point here that has absolutely no relation to the videos or the book. If you disagree with me and you think he's right, then please leave a comment on this video. I also demonstrated in the videos how to use a logic analyzer to do some of these tests. I didn't show it for every single one. I think people would get bored with that. I was just showing how to go about doing it. The process is the same irrespective of the circuit, and I've shown all this multiple times before anyway, but I did show it specifically for this design. As I say, I'd also point out I've posted hundreds of videos on my channel about how to test basically non-specific testing for lots of different types of circuits, so I'm not sure what on earth he's talking about here. On to the next point. As I said, the review was fairly long and rambling. Not sure what he's agreeing to here. He completely agrees with the statement. Now this is what he says, this is not what I say. He's built a VGA graphic card based on logic chips, and this is exactly the topic that cost me days to debug and get right. Okay, nothing to do with me or my book or the videos, and it's not my responsibility to teach him basic electronics so he can get things he's made himself up and running. I'm trying to describe the process of designing something so hopefully he won't have these issues in future. If he's struggling to get his circuits to work, then my advice is to try and understand what I'm trying to get across in the videos and the book rather than complaining about it. Just because he doesn't understand something doesn't mean somebody else is at fault. Maybe he needs to just focus a bit more and accept the deficiency is in his knowledge rather than somewhere else. And again, I'll repeat, the book's not intended to teach people how to fault find in their own circuits, but more a guide on how to approach design. And I clearly state this many times in both the videos and the book. Next point, that I thought this topic is important but beyond the scope of his book, my book, while at the same time spending a lot of effort and time and words on stressing its importance is beyond him. Repeat what I've just said. I've got no idea what he's talking about, and I've already shown that I did an extensive amount of testing, which I showed. I showed a lot of it. I explained the testing I'd done, how I'd gone about it. I showed how I went about it, and I posted entire videos about these tests and how I was doing them. So again, completely erroneous comment here. No idea what he's talking about. On to his next point. The chapter on DRAM is very nice, although again I think incomplete. I could not find any mention if you need to enable the Z80 DRAM support via software, or if that happens I think he means automatically here. Frankly, without that chapter I'd have given it a 1 star. He gave it 2 out of 5, by the way. This is a nonsensical comment. The fact he doesn't understand how a Z80 works isn't really an issue I was covering. That's not what the videos or the book was about. As I say, some people have gone and used a different processor anyway, and also this has nothing, it just doesn't make sense. If he just done what I suggested in the videos and the book and just gone through the Z80 datasheet, then he'd realise how ridiculous this particular comment is. But having said that, he completely ignored the information I did present. There's nothing missing in the videos or in the book, goes into even more detail. I covered every aspect in the videos of driving the DRAM. I went into all those points in more detail in the book. Nothing was missing or omitted. If I start including everything that's not needed or has nothing to do with the subject, then that's madness. That would just go on indefinitely. You don't tend to include things that don't exist. This is just something that doesn't exist anywhere, so I've got no idea what he's talking about, and I don't think he does either. As I say, if additional steps would have been needed, I would have shown them. Also bear in mind that I show the full schematics in the book, and also the full listing for the monitor ROM. So the fact it's a full listing means nothing else is needed beyond what's shown to get the machine up and running. So again, no idea what he's talking about. He just seems to prattle on. But as I say, I cover the entire DRAM. I do that from absolute scratch. I even cover how the DRAMs themselves work, and provide all the information that's needed. And at this point, I was writing these comments as I went through, by the way, and I got to this point, and I feel that the general topic may be beyond his abilities. And while I don't criticise anyone for that, in fact I encourage people to push themselves and read about anything they can get books about. Just because someone doesn't understand it doesn't mean it's a fault in somebody else. quite willing to accept responsibility if I'm not making things clear. That's not really what he's saying here. He just doesn't seem to understand the general concepts that I'm trying to explain. I'm baffled who the audience for this book should be. The subtitle reads A Practical Guide to Designing a Working Z80 Computer System. Yes, it's a guide to how to go about designing one, not a build manual for a specific machine. And the book is intended for anyone that wants to go about doing that, or just wanted to know how machines were built back then, or is just interested in electronics. With this book at hand, I can't create a clone of the JMS computer. I'm not sure what JMS computer is, but I think we know what he means. Well, earlier he said he probably could, so again he's contradicting himself, but it's wrong anyway. The book easily contains enough information to build a clone of the machine, although that's not really what I want people to do. That wasn't my goal, which is why I've stressed many times in the videos and in the book that I would prefer that people design the run system. By all means use the one I presented as a starting point, but I would highly recommend people take the material as a guide as to how to go about it, but then design their own. On to his next point. I did say it was a long review. I also find it hard to imagine that with this book a novice could design a Z80 computer themselves, let alone build one. Well, it's not really intended as a novice. I never said it was. In fact, I specifically said that it's not for the faint-hearted. This is a complex thing to design, and this character seems to think by reading a single book he would know everything he needs to know about how to design complex electronic systems. This does, of course, the book does, of course, expect people to have a minimal level of expertise in electronics, and if they don't, then hopefully it would spur some interest in them going away and learning a bit more about it, and that's kind of what my entire channel is all about. But I think the comment is disingenuous and demonstrates the over-entitled way that he thinks, that he seems to think that just because this doesn't hold his hand and teach him every single thing about electronics, that there's something wrong with the book. I think he needs to understand that electronics is a complex subject, and he needs to put in the effort to learn about it in more details so he understands this type of material. On to his next point. Had a hard time reading a book. A lot of it is just rambling around. Actually, that is similar to his videos. It's most likely this attitude that prevents him from learning, although his comment does make me wonder why he watches my videos. And don't get me wrong, it's perfectly fair if somebody does not like my style of trying to get information across, but stating that the book doesn't contain information when it very clearly does is a different issue. I think that's dishonest, and that's what I'm calling out here. That's the purpose of this video. On to his next point. He certainly shows very interesting things, but he never really gets to the bottom of things and explains everything enough so that someone with far less experience could duplicate it. It's always a bit of it's possibly a fair point. There's always a fair or a complex decision as to how much detail to show. It's whether I'm aiming to show a complete finished machine or just demonstrate the individual parts of it. In this instance, though, I did both. I showed the individual circuits in a lot of detail, from a blank sheet of paper through the thinking, initial design, the schematics development, how they were modified, and it goes through this in more detail in the book, and also the final schematic and how the circuits worked. So I'm not quite sure what he thinks could be added, other than maybe some knowledge that he actually understands the basics of electronics. So I did go down to a fairly basic level. Although the overall machine is very complicated, I did go into each circuit in a lot of detail, and he was complaining I was rambling, and then complains I wasn't going into enough detail. So again, a bit of a contradiction, not quite sure which one it is. A far cry from the work of, I've redacted the name, I'm not going to start bringing other people into this, But as I say, I was writing these responses as I was going through. I wasn't actually going to show this, I was just going to use it as a script to read from. I don't normally write scripts when I do videos, as you've probably guessed. But I thought I would with this one, just to keep it consistent and coherent. What I wrote was, now I think I understand. It looks like he may have been a bit of a fanboy for somebody else. The person he references has never built a machine like this, and doesn't go into any more detail than I do, so not really quite sure what his agenda is here. But at this point I kind of decided to really look at the review in a different light. So next point, in the end he would give the subtitle "The Diary of an Expert Electronic Engineer, How He Built a Z80 System." A nice book on the nightstand if you want to read 10 pages before falling asleep. Not a practical guide at all. Have to agree that if I read a book that I don't understand, I do tend to get fairly bored with it and have to persist and try harder to read it. Clearly this character is not. But maybe in a few years he'll come back and be able to more fully appreciate the material. But I honestly feel that this person will never put in the effort that's required to get to that level. Either way, he seems to have done nothing watching the videos of the book, and that is a failing on my part. I feel I've kind of let him down with the material I've produced. But I can only go so far with this. I could have made the book 1,000 pages rather than 450. But to be honest, I'm not sure that would have helped him. So it's a bit of a dilemma as to how to try and help someone like this, especially when the response you get is of this nature. But as I said, I think he's got a different agenda here. So that was the end of the review. As I say here, the conclusion I came to is that he purchased a book that's beyond his current knowledge, which is not a bad thing, but he does need to acknowledge that and put in the required effort to learn the subject if he wants to understand it, and not simply throw a tantrum and blame somebody else because he can't get his head around it. If he'd asked specific questions about bits he didn't understand, I could have answered them. That's what I try and do in the videos. But he seems to want a complete solution, including the knowledge being handed to him without having to actually learn it, which obviously I can't do. I myself have spent over 50 years in learning to do what I do, and I learn something new every day. I think learning is a continual process, but it's only successful if you put in the time and effort that is required, and I don't think this person is willing to do that. So please let me know if you feel I'm being unfair to this person or this reviewer, or that I may have misunderstood his points. And I'd also like to thank everyone who purchased the books and watched the videos.